Paul, George, and West led the Pacers with 24 apiece. And West says,
I was talking to Paul, said it's got to be, him and me, down the stretch. We wanted to extend our season. I thought we just, in terms of our team, we did a great job just, closing the show.
Oklahoma City stayed alive by routing Memphis 104-84. Kevin Durant led the way with 36 points, 10 rebounds. Golden State Warriors nipped the LA Clippers 199 to force a Game 7 and decide which team advances to the Western Conference semifinals. Stephen Curry with 24 points. This is SRN Sports. Round 2 of the NHL playoffs last night. 34th meeting for the Montreal Canadiens and the Boston Bruins in the postseason. And for just the 6th time, it required multiple overtimes to decide the game. P.K. Subban scored a power play goal at 4:17 of the second OT to give the Canadiens a heart-stopping 4-3 victory in Game 1 of that second round best-of-7. Tonight, 2 more conference semifinals get underway. The Rangers are at Pittsburgh. Minnesota Wild will host the defending champion Blackhawks. Major League Baseball yesterday in the American League, Tampa Bay took 2 off Boston, 2-1 and 6-5. Was the Mariners 4, the Yankees 2, Toronto over the Royals 7-3. In the National League, Miami 5, Braves 4. The Reds beat Milwaukee 8-3. It was Colorado 7 and the Mets 4. In interleague play, the Dodgers beat Minnesota twice, 9-4 and 4-3 in 12 innings. It was the Orioles over Pittsburgh 5-1 and 6-5 in 10. With SRN Sports, I'm Michael Harrington.
Hi, Bob Vila here. Details really mean a lot to me, and they should for you too, especially before you hire a contractor to do work around your house. So don't forget this important detail. If you're about to hire a contractor for any reason, ask to see the person's contractor's license. Write the number down, and always ask for references. Then visit myfloridalicense.com or call this number to verify the license is current. Details count. Always check your contractor's license and references.
Can you tell if the leftovers from this dinner party are beginning to grow bacteria that could lead to severe diarrhea, vomiting, and stomach cramps? Listen. You can't see it either. Get leftovers into the refrigerator as soon as possible. Spoiled leftovers can make you very sick, or worse. Roughly 3,000 Americans will die from food poisoning this year, but you can keep your family safer. Check your steps at foodsafety.gov. Brought to you by the USDA, HHS, and the Ad Council.
Hey, Dad, how do you throw a curveball? How do you build a fort? How do refrigerators run? How do fish learn how to swim?
Kids ask a lot of questions.
How high can you jump?
But you don't have to know every answer.
How many phone numbers are there?
Because you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent.
How do cell phones work?
There are thousands of children in foster care who don't need every question answered.
What's electricity?
They just need you.
What's the moon made of?
For more information on how you can adopt, go to adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
WEJF Palm Bay, WKFA St. Catherine.
With SRN News, I'm Rich Thomason in Washington. House Speaker John Boehner wants to set up a select committee to investigate the deadly attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi. Boehner accuses the Obama administration of misleading the American people after the September 2012 assault. He says emails released this week show the administration withheld documents from congressional investigators. Boehner will be scheduling a House vote on establishment of the investigative committee. Also today, there's word that America's top diplomat has been subpoenaed to testify about the Benghazi attack.
Republican Darrell Issa has issued a subpoena to Secretary of State John Kerry to testify before his committee on May 21st. Issa wants to know why emails released this week by a conservative watchdog group were omitted from previous submissions to Congress. The emails from Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes show that within days of the 2012 attack on the U.S. Embassy in Benghazi, Libya, the White House embraced talking points for UN Ambassador Susan Rice. The talking points blamed uprisings on an anti-Islamic video. The attack on the U.S. Embassy killed U.S. Ambassador Chris Stevens and 3 other Americans. Linda Kenyon, SRN News, Capitol Hill.
Also at SRNnews.com, President Obama is hosting German Chancellor Angela Merkel for talks at the White House today, and topping the agenda,
we're united in our support for Ukraine.
2 leaders threaten tougher new sanctions against Russia if Moscow doesn't leave Ukraine alone. And if the Kremlin doesn't back off, Merkel says further sanctions will be unavoidable. The government says employers added 288,000 jobs last month, but while the unemployment rate fell to its lowest level in 5 years, it's due mainly to a sharp rise in the number of people who have simply given up the job hunt. This is SRN News. Orders to American factories advanced strongly for a second month in March, while demand in a key category that signals business investment plans increased by the biggest amount in more than 1 year.
The Commerce Department says orders increased 1.1% in March after increasing 1.5% in February. Those gains followed 2 months of declines in December and January. Orders for core capital goods, considered a good proxy for business investment, jumped 3.5% in March. It was the biggest increase since January of 2013. Bob Agnew, SRN News.
The attorney for a teenager who's charged in the fatal stabbing of another Connecticut high school student says his client is showing signs of active psychosis. Fire derailment of an oil train in Lynchburg, Virginia, has emergency officials elsewhere in the state concerned about their ability to respond to such accidents. More details at srnnews.com.
We are sorry for your pain. Sorry for the death. Israel behind us. And he insisted that war is not ending, or the threat is not a rocket.
All right, so I get ready for the show today, as I do. I always come in an hour, a couple hours earlier. Everybody thinks as a radio talk show host, you just pretty much get on the air and you just spout out. Now, I have the capability and the ability to do that, or should I say the talent, but I don't. I have to prep, research, and do a lot of information because, remember, as a conservative out here, I've only got a few shots to get it right. As I said before, the liberal left, whether they get it or not, they run out of ammunition, they run out of bullets. Their buddies in the liberal media just got a Gatling gun ready to go if they miss. And, of course, they miss all the time. I only have a couple times to get it right. This is the Ed Dean Radio Show, the #1 radio political talk show anywhere in the state of Florida. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're not picking up this show in your neck of the woods, you can watch us online at eddeanradio.com, eddeanradio.com. Email address, eddeanradio@gmail.com, eddeanradio@gmail.com. At Twitter is eddeanradio and facebook.com/eddeanradio. Sara Brenner is coming on today. Brittany Pounders from Liberty Juice. Shannon Goessling from the Southeastern Legal Foundation. And my buddy John Hawkins from townhall.com and rightwingnews.com coming over here. What does the military think about Obama? I want to talk about Democrats are dropping one of their own. One of the most popular Democrats in the country today. They are dropping. I mean, if the Republicans are going to do the same thing when it comes to Wendy Davis, could you actually talk about the war on women? We'll discuss that in a little bit. I still want to talk about Donald Sterling. I think this is a scapegoat, that how they're trying to get rid of him and his team for stupid comments he make and the privacy of what he said. Oh, man, what about free speech? I mean, can I no longer tell any jokes that may be deemed off color or politically incorrect or sexist? I mean, is that the way we're going? So we'll talk and discuss this in just a little bit. I wanted to talk about the arts today, and National Puke Radio, and public broadcasting, and then I am about ready to come on the air. And as I'm gloating over some of these sites, Paul Krugman. Now, if you don't know who Paul Krugman is, let me just reintroduce some of you in case you forgot. This is the guy who says nobody should worry about the deficits happening right now.
Been saying for 5 years, don't worry about these deficit things for the time being. They're non-issue. Other people are saying imminent crisis, imminent crisis. How many times do they have to be wrong and do people like me have to be right before people start to believe us?
You're right. I mean, this guy is to the left of Barack Obama. He's a New York Times columnist, talks and covers economics. Now, I was a former financial reporter. I'm in the business in the financial world. Even though I'm on 5 days a week on talk radio, I understand economics pretty simply, or pretty simple. There are some things that get a little bit deep for people. But as I'm scouring, just ready to close up shop there, get ready for the show, New York Times posted on another site where Paul Krugman says why economics failed. And I'm sitting back going, wait a second. I mean, we just had 288,000 jobs. I get into a big itch fest because all the liberals I'm having a discussion with on Facebook yesterday are, hey, did you see this article by Forbes and the Wall Street Journal about it's the weather, the reason why the economic growth was almost recessionary. And I pointed out, if you read the same article, it pointed out that it really had nothing to do with the weather. It was just imports, exports, everything. It just was down. I mean, what may have been shoddy weather in one part of the country was great weather in another part of the country. So now Paul Krugman's got an article out from yesterday talking about why economics failed, and this is coming from the liberal left. And I know where this is coming from because in the article, if you go to New York Times, the op-ed pages, he says, quote, and he blames Obama, blames the Republicans. We needed, quote, we got the worst economic situation since that of the 1930s. We need more government spending. In fact, he says we needed, past tense, i.e. a bigger stimulus here, we needed more government spending, not less, to fill the hole left by inadequate private demand. Oh, so basically if the market says it's down, we don't want to buy these products, but in order to ensure that business does well, let's just give them a free round of money out there instead of letting them rise and fall based on their product, based on their advertising, based on how they attract customers. The article, without going too much into it, talks about why economics have failed. The liberals are starting to finally admit that this president owns the economy, that the economic policies put out by this president, they're not saying it wasn't good enough. They're saying that he didn't go far to left enough, that he didn't spend enough on stimulus, that he didn't spend enough. That is what the liberals are saying right now. Well, as I said on this past week, I'd love to have this argument with many of you out there running for office. I've said this before. If you're a Democrat running for office, you want to come on the air, hey, we're number one in the state. You're more than welcome to come on our radio show. I'll give you all the free publicity you want. We're on FM talk radio if you didn't like AM. And I want to, I mean, we can talk about Obamacare, but I want you to explain to me, are we in a, quote, recovery, which they're, of course, they've been advised not to use that word anymore by liberals out there. Where are we at? And by the way, are we still blaming Bush? Or does the president now own this economy? Krugman says since 2010, we've seen a sharp decline in discretionary spending and an unprecedented decline in budget deficits. Are you flipping kidding me here? The president has outshined that of Bush. You know, China owns our currency. It's unfair. It's unpatriotic. And they're out there claiming there isn't enough money. The precedent decline in budget deficits. What planet is he on? Folks, I honestly think that this guy lives in Florida. He's already got a prescription for legalization of medical marijuana, and he's already started to puff it. And he says because we do not have enough spending. Again, this is the op-ed columnist for the New York Times. And the result has been an anemic growth in long-term unemployment on a scale not seen since the 1930s. And then, of course, he says to all of you out there that were predicting with all these, quote, big deficits and big spending, that we were going to see interest rates and inflations rise. They were going to go high. That budget deficits would soar to interest rates soaring and inflation. Now, let me explain this because he says they haven't. That is because not of the market. The reason why interest rates are low is because the Fed has artificially put them low. Now, many of you out there, you need to listen to this. This is about your back pocket. This is about the economy here. This is not based on the free market. In fact, how Krugman says, and many other liberals out there, how to turn around the economy is not based on the free market to turn us around. It's more based on government spending. And by the way, the liberals are out there saying that we didn't spend enough on stimulus. We didn't spend enough on Obamacare. We didn't spend enough on the farm bills. We didn't spend enough on some of these bailouts. Really? I mean, that's kind of like me asking a question. Okay, is $10 enough for the minimum wage? If not, then just give me a number where the minimum wage should be. But Krugman says, oh, the interest rates. Folks, inflation, believe it or not, in the food market has gone up. And by continuing to artificially keep interest rates low, because they're going to have to rise sooner or later, my friends, then interest rates will rise. Now, I don't know how high, but when they rise, it's not because, well, you know, the policies, but no, it's right, and it's going to rise because we've artificially kept them low. And when you artificially have kept them low, I got news for you, folks. Based on how the financial structure is in this country, things will not look good. Let me go back to ABC's This Week. Greta Van Susteren was in a debate with Paul Krugman and George Stephanopoulos about the economy. And listen to this liberal here, which I'm reading from. You're going to hear me in a moment about how he says that regulations are not hurting businesses out there and all this. I mean, well, I'll let the clip speak for itself here. Here it is.
But the Main Street is that we're strangling small businesses. I mean, you know, no one's paying much attention to these small businesses. The regulations that are strangling them, some are laughable and silly, but they have a profound impact on the job creators, those who are making jobs. They can't afford to hire people.
Here comes Krugman.
On this, and what's holding small business back is not regulations; it's the fact that they don't.
It's not all. It's
wait. You hear what he says? He says what's holding small business back is not regulations; is that they don't have sales. Here is one more time.
And what's holding small business back is not regulations; it's the fact that they don't.
It's
have
not
sales.
all. It's some of it. Some of it.
There's.
Well, if people are not spending enough money out there because they don't have enough money, there's not enough hours out there based on the projection of what minimum wage is going to be, which is going to trample unemployment. It's going to make sure if you had 30 hours a week making $7-8 an hour, you can guarantee it that you're going to get less hours, and the money you'll make per hour will not overshadow that. If you're making $8 an hour at 30 hours a week, I have news for you. They're going to cut your hours back if they jack up to $10 an hour, which means you may get 15 hours a week, which means the pay increase will not suffice. You're making more money now than you would in a minimum wage increase. But yet, we're going to throw this off on business. So business is not going to be able to afford it. Business doesn't want to throw on the consumers out there because we are already in a tight market. Well, Krugman says, well, it's not regulations. It's because they don't have sales. And yet, if there is no consumer money out there based on the economy, how do you turn the sales around, Mr. Krugman, out there? How do you do it? Well, we give them more unemployment extension benefits. We give them more welfare. Why? Because it continues to pump more money into the economy. But yet, if I'm spending $5 and only getting in return $1.50, there's something wrong with that math. Regulations is hurting businesses. Just talk about Obamacare. Talk about the financial industry. Talk about what's going on in the environment with OSHA and EPA. Here's more of Krugman saying some of his nonsense.
Correlation, looking across, you know, which parts of the economy do small businesses complain about regulations, which don't they? There's no correlation between that and actual job creation.
Well, then they're making it
Please ask Paul a question, then I'll bring you in. I just want to ask him one question.
Did you hear that? There's no correlation between problems and regulations in small business?
Complain about regulations, which don't they? There's no correlation between that and actual job creation.
Well, then they're making it
Please ask Paul a question, then I'll bring you in. I just want to ask him one question. But is there one exception to that, perhaps, on the healthcare, where firms that are greater than 50 people have to pay more, and don't you see some firms cutting off at 49?
Okay, let me stop right there. So Paul Krugman from the New York Times is out there today in the New York Times editorial saying that, hey, the reason why we have a problem in the economy today is because we're not spending enough money. It's not from the private sector. He says we're not spending enough money from the government sector out there. Well, there is no deficit, so there's no problem with interest rates and inflation. So George Stephanopoulos asked Paul Krugman the question, well, listen, if you say that regulations don't have a problem about small business, what about those when it comes to Obamacare? Because at the break mark, it's either the 49ers, one of the great football teams, but the 49ers/50 means 50 or more, you have to, yes, get involved with Obamacare. And Krugman says, nah, that's really not the problem here.
There might be, but you can't see that in the numbers. And the overwhelming
fact
of
of the matter. Well, if you talk to them, instead of looking at just numbers, why don't you sit down and talk to them? And if you actually talk to these people and you go on to a lot of them are struggling with this. They don't understand a lot of the things that happen to them. They don't understand a lot of things that happen in Washington. They're very cautious because they see a real dismal economy out there. And that does have an impact.
If you actually talk to them, that's not what
I like to.
So Krugman says, no. If you really talk to these people, that's not the problem out there. So wait a second. Small businesses are lying because they don't want to hire anybody. Small businesses are making this up. And the bottom line is the liberal left is saying, the problem with Obamacare, and whether employers, 50 more have to get involved and give and provide health care benefits. And there's not many businesses out there that are at 48, 49. I mean, they're going to cross that 50 threshold, and they're going to pay for this. Listen, I have a brother-in-law, family members in Georgia. And being a financial guy that I am, he comes up to me and says, listen, he goes, we're talking to our accountants right now, and they have a big company up there. He says, we're at 49. And he goes, we know we got to go beyond the 50 mark. And he goes, and why is there an incentive for us to hire out there? That means more of our profit has to come in, forced through a mandate because of Obamacare down the road, that now we're going to have to provide health care with all this. And I looked at him, I said, you're exactly right. I talked to many clients that have asked me about Obamacare. And I sat back and said, yep, there's the number. There's the dividing line at 49. That is a regulation. That's small business. And by the way, if you think that 50 and over is a big business, you're wrong here. The bottom line is that this is small business. This is dealing with small business. And yet the liberal left does not want to identify themselves or identify with that. Regulation does put a hamper on small business. It does it through financial regulations. It does it through OSHA. It does it through the EPA. It does it through banking regulations. It does it through IRS regulations. It does through Obamacare. I mean, the list can keep going and going and going. And again, Paul Krugman from the liberal left, says, hey, we don't need to worry about deficits here. You know that?
We have been saying for 5 years, don't worry about these deficit things for the time being. They're non-issue. Other people are saying imminent crisis. How many times do they have to be wrong and do people like me have to be right before people start to believe us?
You're right.
Imminent crisis. Let me say we have a 0.1 growth rate. We have the largest market. Well, it's going to sound an oxymoron. We have the smallest job labor participation force we've seen since 1977, since back to the days of Jimmy Carter. And you mean to tell me there's nothing wrong out there? Almost 60% of those polled in the ABC Wall Street Journal report poll, Quinnipiac, 57 to 60% out there still believe we are in a recession. And you mean to tell me that we got nothing to worry about? To the liberals out there, I guess the argument they're going to have to tackle this is, hey, we didn't spend enough money when it came to the bailouts. We didn't spend enough money on the GM bailout. We didn't spend enough money on the stimulus. Did we spend enough money on the TARP? We didn't spend enough money on bailout when it comes to home foreclosures. We didn't spend enough money on the cash for clunkers. We didn't spend enough money on the Dodd-Frank rules and regulations here. It's never enough money. And the liberal left sits back and says, the deficits aren't as big as they could be. Really? I mean, really? Do you guys really want to go down this road? And I'm telling you, it's not the social issues that are tearing up this country. It's the financial issues. Remember, what can kill a marriage quicker than anything else is your finances or lack of. Believe me, I've seen it, all right? And this is what's killing this country, is the lack of dealing with our finances, primarily on the liberal left, but yes, even on both sides. Back in a few moments, this is the Ed Dean Radio Show.
Would you deny a poor man's cry, a poor man's cry? Just when I'm finding it hard to breathe, you lift away the side of me. Oh, baby, I see the light, it's burning bright. We're stars. Oh, and you save me from the world.
With an SRN News Business Brief, I'm Andrew Stewart. A Senate bipartisan team urging the House to take up a jobless benefits extension bill.
Rhode Island Democrat Jack Reed says the bill that passed in the Senate weeks ago is still awaiting action in the House.
This bipartisan agreement that we worked on, Senator Hill and I, is fully paid for. It includes reforms to help job seekers return to the workforce faster, and it strengthens our economic recovery.
Republican Dean Heller of Nevada says he's confident of the outcome if only House Speaker John Boehner would allow a vote.
This piece of legislation that we passed, that we worked together on, would pass the House of Representatives if they were to put that on the floor.
The long-term unemployment benefits ran out in December, just after Christmas. Linda Kenyon, SRN News, Capitol Hill.
Honda says a shorting terminal in the 2014 model year Odysseys, which prevents deployment of the airbag before it's put into the vehicle, may have been damaged during the assembly process. That may illuminate the airbag warning light and prevent the side curtain airbags from deploying. Honda says no crashes or injuries have been reported related to the issue, which was discovered through warranty repairs. Dealers will repair the minivans for free. Honda will notify owners starting May 16th. Keith Peters, SRN News.
The recall affects some Cadillac SRX SUVs from the 2013 model year with 3.6-liter V6 engines. GM says the problem happens when the transmission shifts from first to second gear and the driver brakes the vehicle to less than 5 miles an hour. The automaker says a lag in acceleration can increase the risk of a crash. GM has recalled about 7 million vehicles since February, including 2.6 million for a deadly ignition switch problem. The Education Department has revealed the names of 55 colleges and universities facing a Title IX investigation for their responses to sexual abuse and violence on their campuses. The schools range from huge public universities, including Ohio State and Arizona State, to private colleges such as Knox College and Swarthmore College. Some of the institutions say they're cooperating with the department, though they're offering scant details about what information the agency is seeking.
With business, I'm Andrew Stewart.
Hi, this is Ted Cruz, and you're listening to the Ed Dean Radio Show.
Two, three, break!
All right, I am more of the Ed Dean Radio Show. The email address, eddeanradio@gmail.com, as I am your white privileged radio talk show host. And by the way, you're going to force me to get off the radio because I just even said that. I mean, the reason why I keep telling everybody keeps asking me this. Why? Because remember, if you don't like Obama, you're a racist. So evidently, according to the liberal left, we don't no longer use the R word racist. So now we all been elevated to as a white privileged. You know, so I'm a white privileged radio talk show. All right, Sara Marie Brenner here on the Ed Dean Radio Show. By the way, SaraMarieBrenner.com. Am I correct on that, Sara Marie?
You are SaraMarieBrenner.com, and then, of course, BrennerBrief.com.
That's right. I follow your stuff, man.
Over there. Yeah.
Are you not up to like 6 o'clock in the morning every day putting out like John Hawkins is? I've actually listened. Hawkins and I have spent the John Hawkins, by the way, is going to be on with us in a few moments. Townhall.com and also his very popular website, rightwingnews.com. You know that guy gets 100,000 hits a day. Anyway, so we were up in D.C. We had to do a big radio show up there at the Heritage Foundation, and so I just said, listen, I'm just going to crash. So we stayed in the same room, separate beds, of course. And so, anyways, this guy is up till 7 o'clock at night. I mean, in the morning. He's very successful, but he was posting things left and right for his blog. You don't do that, do you?
I have nights where 2 and 3 a.m. is when I go to bed,
normal.
but
right.
we've got a team and a lot of great writers, so thankfully I don't have to do all that on my own.
All right, I want to get into this interview you had with, is it General Valley?
We had both of them actually on the show last night. General Paul Valley and also General Tom McInerney were both on the show with me last night for the full hour.
Did you ask McInerney why he looked a little? I mean, I like McInerney, but I mean, remember that Malaysian airline he was just totally dead wrong on? Did you get a chance to ask him that?
Oh, I don't think he was totally dead wrong. They still haven't found the
Oh, wait a second. He said that thing was most likely, his sources says that thing probably landed in Pakistan.
You know what? He talked about it again on the show last night, and he talked about it when he was on with me a couple weeks ago. He still thinks that it's in one of the stands.
It's in one of the stands.
Until they find it, I think I'm going to go with him and his sources. And I mean, clearly all these other governments can't find the plane, so...
You're not going to, not in the Indian Ocean. Are you kidding me? Do you know that is the graveyard of oceans? They dump everything out there?
I know that they do, but there's just too much... There's too much from a behavioral standpoint to have a pilot like that just tank a plane.
You know, Sara Marie,
else is so careful.
Can I tell you something? You've taken the arts way too seriously in your life.
Here we go.
I mean, listen, I like McInerney, but I mean, some of my friends and family who, not naming any names, work with the CIA and things, and they just know there's just no way that thing landed in Pakistan. I mean, it's a great conspiracy. I mean, it would be interesting to see if that happened. They just said there's just no way it would have happened. And McInerney still stands by it, which I think he's wrong.
Yeah, well, he may be, but until we find the plane, nobody really knows, right? So
we take his word for it until we find the plane, right?
No. I'm not saying we take his word for it. I'm just saying we don't know. We don't know if it's right or wrong. We don't know if the Malaysian government's right or wrong. We don't know at this point until they find the plane.
Did you know, I posted this on Facebook about a month ago, they actually, before the plane went down, Malaysian Airlines actually had a new slogan that says, fly with us, we're going to fly you into the unknown. That is a true story.
Oh, no.
Oh, my word. So, all right, so let's, before I get to the arts here in a few moments, let me set this up because you had General Paul, it's Paul Valley?
Vallely,
okay. You had him on your, what was it, last night or the night before?
Last night.
Okay, you had him on last night. So let me set this scenario up, and I want to know what your answer is. For the last several years, before we found out the budgets of this year, and this is what I really think how Obama thinks of the military, primarily when over the last several years, hey, we saved GM, we went after bin Laden. When you look on the surface, it was not like we saw with Clinton, that there was no cuts in the military, that Obama seemed to be pro-military. And then this year, between him and Hagel and Kerry, they released their budget numbers where they want to cut back to the days of World War I, which is just devastating to our military here. Then I had Pete Hegseth from Concerned Veterans for America, all these guys come on the show, and I said, you want to know something? It took about 4 to 5 years, but Obama has shown his true colors, I think, when it comes to the military. My question to you is, when you talk to these generals on your radio show, what is their attitude towards Obama, and what do they think his attitude is towards the military?
Yeah.
What's your feel?
General Vallely has said, and he said it again last night on my show, that he believes at this point that Obama should be impeached, not just because of Benghazi, but because of a number of situations. And I think everybody is fully aware of the lawlessness, the disregard for the Constitution, a lot of the things that are happening that give General Vallely that feeling to want to see him gone. And I think the members of the military who I have on my show, I think the biggest thing that they believe is that their role and responsibility is to protect this country. And when you have a president who is not interested in protecting the interests of this country with foreign policy, with even domestic policy, protecting the Constitution, you end up with a lot of people, especially those who are retired from the military, who have a lot more freedom to speak, who are not very happy with the way that things are going. And, I mean, even McInerney last night on my show said, we still don't know where Obama was the night of all the Benghazi happenings.
Now, let me ask you, let me interrupt you. I got Richard Miniter is a good friend of mine. He is the guy that wrote the book, Losing Bin Laden, Shadow Wars. He was a good friend who knows a lot when it comes to the issue, what happened with Benghazi, where he's even admitted by saying that, the reports out there are other areas that's not being reported by the media, that he probably was at some dinner with Michelle Obama. Now, having said all of that, we know that the administration has dropped the ball primarily with Benghazi. And, of course, the media's attitude is right now, it's like what Hillary Clinton said back in, was it October, November of 2012? What difference does it make? It's almost 2 years later. When you talk to McInerney, when you talk to, what was it, what's his name again? Vallely. Why do they say that Obama should be impeached? Is it based on domestic, or is it based also on foreign policy or military issues?
I think at this point it's really a pileup of all of it. I talked to General Vallely this morning when we learned that the select committee was going to hopefully be formed now in the House. The Boehner is finally letting that go through. I called the general and said, I bet you've got to be happy, because that's one of the things he's really been working toward. And the thing that he said to me this morning when I spoke with him is, he said, Sara, we are at war in this country. People don't realize it, but we are at war. And we're at war for saving this country. We're at war to salvage our Constitution. We're at war to still protect somewhat our interests overseas. And we're at war in a number of ways in this country right now that I think that there are still people who haven't quite woken up to that yet. And so when you look at it's just a long list of things, from Benghazi to the IRS to, having an AG at the head of this nation who says to the state AGs, hey, if you don't like a law, don't defend it, and we're all cool with that. I mean, you've just got a lawless administration, and when you have good people who serve this nation and serve this country for the right reasons and understand how important it is to protect that document, to protect a society that's based around laws, and to protect our national security, when they see a president purposefully disregarding it, it makes their blood boil, and it should.
You know why I don't want to see the president impeached? Because I want to beat him on the issues. I think there should be investigations with Fast and Furious, with Lois Lane Lerner and the Prophet Elijah Muhammad Cummings, congressman there from, was it Maryland or Delaware? In their hand they had with the IRS scandal. Also, when it comes to Benghazi and NSA spying, I want these guys embarrassed, all right? I don't want to be...
We can't do it.
No, it can be done. I mean, come on. I mean, if we can beat them on Obamacare, and the bottom line is we go through an impeachment, most people will be catching later on down the road going, okay, what's been going on? The point I'm saying is the more you have an investigation before you go to a court trial, some people may pay attention out there. I want these guys embarrassed for what they have done. I don't necessarily want them impeached, but the bottom line is like when I play sports, I don't want to be the guy in a technicality because he got disqualified because he didn't have enough players on the court. If I know that I'm better than the other team, I want to be able to beat this guy. And what many conservatives, unfortunately, are saying is, well, we waved the white flag. We can't beat these guys on the issues, so let's beat them on a technicality.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I personally, I think that this country is at the point where if we could not have this current president there and have him removed from office in a legal way, I think that would be a lot better for this country than what we're going to.
So what, you're going to replace him with who? Biden, who's just as bad?
I really think at the end of the day, Obama and the people around him are what is spearheading a lot of this. And yes, we still have to beat him on the issues, but I think it's also we've got to be careful to make sure that we realize as long as he's in there and doing executive orders and running regulations through all of these other sectors of the government, we don't have the ability to stop some of these things until it's too late.
Yeah, they can stop if they'll do their job through the Constitution. Congress has the final say.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, that's another big if, and they're not. I mean, look at how long it's taken Boehner to finally put together this select committee.
I know.
And
I
I've got one of his primary opponents on my show tonight, J.D. Winteregg. I mean, there's a point where you've got to put some pressure back on some of these folks and get them out.
You know, when you talk about these investigations, you know, for example, when it comes to the IRS scandals with Lois Lane Lerner and all those guys, what's interesting about it is where would the Republicans, you know, we've heard reports, I know Levin talked about this, in 2012, Mitch McConnell, Mitt Romney, a lot of these guys knew of the reports out there about Tea Party groups, evangelical groups, 912 groups, 501c3, 501c4, that basically were being investigated or not being investigated, but their status was being halted by the IRS. They knew these reports were there, and as much as the prophet Congressman Elijah Muhammad Cummings out there and Lois Lane Lerner, I want to know what some of the establishment Republicans knew about this as well.
Yeah, I think.
And they didn't say a thing about it. I mean, why this was going on, by the way.
No, they didn't at all. And I think, you know, you've got a lot of more moderate Republicans who never really want to rock the boat because they try to be friends with both sides. And there's a point in time where you can't do that anymore. You've got to get off the fence. And I think personally that's part of why Mitt Romney lost, because he had opportunities to get off the fence and to really go at the jugular and chose not to do that. So when you have Republicans who are trying to play both sides, not standing up for principles, in some cases not even having principles, what do we expect to have happen? I mean, they're not people, unfortunately, who are based and founded in principles and in things that they believe in and talk about on a daily basis. You know, Ted Cruz is a perfect example. He doesn't have to have a script to talk about the Constitution and our values and our rights. He can just naturally talk about it because he believes it with every fiber of his being. But a lot of these other people don't necessarily, and so they don't go after these kinds of things until the proof is so in their face that they've missed the boat.
Sarah Marie Brenner here on the Ed Dean Radio Show. So last week, a couple weeks ago, we talked about something about the arts came up. And, of course, you know, when there's an issue that just kind of like – because nobody ever talks about the arts anymore. I was a former news guy. I used to cover the arts all the time in a budget. For example, I'm like, why is a small county doing $300,000? Why is the local National Puke Radio NPR station getting $50,000 to carry some liberal? And then I mean, I understood why there was government funding out there. I've never been a big fan of government support for the arts. Now, listen, I'll go to the symphonies. I'll pay for that with some friends, and I don't mind doing that out of my pocket, but I don't think they need any government money. So a couple of people are like, hey, ask her next time she comes on what she thinks about the arts, since you are a true art aficionado out there, you know?
Well, for those who don't know, I grew up in musical theater, and I am a classically trained pianist, and I did opera and theater and all kinds of stuff. But
were you the Phantom? Okay.
No.
I'm just kidding with you. I love you because you and I can rib each other, and we get on very well. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's fine. I will fight back twice as hard.
Good.
No. I'll tell you, the part with the arts that bothers me the most, I think, is when government supports something in the arts that is an opinion. And just like what you said with NPR, if you're going to have somebody on who clearly is biased one way or the other, which they all are on NPR, if you ask me,
right.
That's where you get into an issue, because government funds are not supposed to be going, in my view, to one particular point of view. That's just not supposed to be happening. I think every community kind of has to make their own choice when it comes to sponsoring the arts. If you have a symphony that is dying and it's been there for 150 years, and you have a way to have a levy on the ballot where people can vote for it to decide whether they're going to help pay for the symphony, I'm fine with that.
I'm with you.
Decide.
I agree.
I think at the end of the day, we have so many things that we actually need from a liberal classical education perspective, and I don't mean liberal from a political standpoint, but from a liberal arts standpoint.
No, let me jump in because I only got a few minutes left.
Yeah.
I think Frontline and other shows on PBS are fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I pay for them with by the way, I'm paying for it when it comes to my local cable provider, by the way, okay? Having said that, I'm not willing to give them any government money. Where do you stand on giving government money to NPR and PBS?
I think the time has come and gone for that. It's not something that is needed anymore. I mean, we have so many options of places where we can get our news. It was different a long time ago when we didn't have that, but we have that now. Frankly, I think the only one that should continue is C-SPAN. That's really the one where we're able to see what's going on, see hearings, see things that otherwise people from across the rest of the country would never have a chance to see or to hear.
No.
NPR and PBS both can fight for the free capitalist market like we all do.
Now, you're pretty much straight conservative, no pun intended with the word straight, and you grew up in the arts. So anyways, I'm being stereotyping. Why is it that you ended up being a conservative when most of the liberal in the arts crowd seems to be very liberal?
Well, I'll tell you, that's part of why I turned down some of the scholarships and didn't actually end up going into it as a career, because there's a point where I just can't be around a lot of that all day long. I was raised in an entrepreneurial family. I started my first business when I was 12, and so it's something that I've just kind of always dealt with. And at the end of the day, when you look at your paycheck, do you want to keep your money or do you want to give it all back to the government who's going to spend it on crappy things like NPR? So,
That's pretty good.
I think it's pretty much common sense when you are given that choice and you're not brainwashed with one side or the other.
Can I tell you something? If they ever invoked the Fairness Doctrine Act, they want to have more liberals on conservative shows. You and I will be the first people knocking at the door at the local NPR station for fairness.
Yes. There you go.
We'll do it. SaraMarieBrenner.com, very, very popular host on her own show. SaraMarieBrenner.com. You can catch her show nightly. Hey, as always, I enjoy having you come on today.
Oh, thanks a lot, Ed. Have a great weekend.
You're great. Thank you so much. Coming up next, we got a lot more to discuss. My other good friend, Brittany Pounders from Liberty Juice. Democrats are throwing one of their biggest names under the bus, and it happens to be a female, and yet no one's talking about it, quote, war on women. One of my favorite guests, Brittany Pounders, who is able to keep up with me, also like Sara Marie, is going to join us here in a few moments. Coming up in just a few moments right here on the Ed Dean Radio Show.
I want to be somewhere with you. I want to do just what you want to do.
This is SRN News.
The Labor Department says the unemployment rate fell by 0.4% to 6.3% last month. The figures are a sign the economy is picking up following a brutal winter, which slowed growth. However, the decrease in the jobless rate occurred in large part because the number of people seeking work fell sharply.
The chairman of the White House Council of Economic Advisors is offering a measured response to the better-than-expected jobs report. Jason Furman describes April's employment growth as solid and says while the report happens to be above expectations, it's broadly consistent with recent trends. He says the president continues to believe more can and should be done to support the economic recovery. In January, President Obama requested a review of data laws following an outcry over the NSA's surveillance programs. White House Counselor John Podesta led the review and has released a report offering recommendations to safeguard Americans' data and provide more protections for emails sought during law enforcement investigations. The recommendations are not binding, but they're in line with many of the president's previous calls for addressing privacy issues. Greg Clugston, SRN News, the White House.
Representative Tammy Duckworth has introduced a measure that would prevent lawmakers from using their congressional allowances to book first-class airline seats. Duckworth says, in her words, "As members of Congress, we lead by example." She adds, "With so many working families out there trying to make ends meet, it's important that we do not spend taxpayer dollars on luxuries like first-class air travel." House members receive an allowance each year for staff, travel, and office expenses. The average allowance is about $1 million. Linda Kenyon, SRN News, Capitol Hill. Louisiana Democrat Mary Landrieu and North Dakota Republican John Hoeven introduced the bill they say will grant approval to build the oil pipeline. The challenge, they say, will be to get the 60 votes they need to advance the bill. It's uncertain if a Keystone bill would be attached as an amendment to an energy efficiency bill or if it would be a standalone measure. Some senators say they will not go along with the bill. Among them is Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. He says the law makes it clear that it's up to the administration to decide whether the Keystone pipeline will move ahead. Congress's role is limited to issuing construction permits. Linda Kenyon, SRN News, Capitol Hill.
More details at srnnews.com.
He is the greatest intercontinental champion of all time.
Well, I'm the best corner in the game. When you try me with a sorry receiver like Crabtree, that's the result you're going to get. Don't you ever talk about me.
Can I ask a question, Macho Man?
Don't you open your mouth about the best.
I'm sorry about that.
LOB.
All right, more of the Ed Dean Radio Show. My good friend from Texas, Brittany Pounders, probably one of the best political commentators I've had on the radio show for some time, and I just don't say that about anybody. And by the way, she's married, happily married. By the way, 15th anniversary, correct, this past week?
15th, yesterday.
Wow.
I was a child bride. Let's just get that straight. I'm not.
Wait. I thought you got married at 40. Okay. So I'm just kidding. Happy anniversary. So I don't just say things just because I'm trying to hit on some women. It just doesn't happen here on the Ed Dean Radio Show. Anyways, her great blog, libertyjuice.com, is the contact information. Wendy Davis has been one of the top prime, at least on paper, at least on television, at least on the surface, one of the top Democrats out there. But they all gathered around her because on one issue, she was pro-choice. And we're going to stick it to those mean idiot Republicans out there. Supreme Court came back and said, hey, you know what? Guess what, Texans? The laws that are passed by Texas, guess what? We're going to stand in force here for pro-lifers. And now it seems that the Democrats are dropping her big time. And I'm just trying to think to myself, if this had been a Republican dropping a woman, the media would be, hey, the war on women.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. And I'm wondering as well, where's the outrage? I mean, they're leaving their female candidate wounded and dying on the side of the road, and nobody's saying a word about it. But, you know, nobody knew who she was, like we've talked about several times in Texas, really, outside of her district until she came on the scene last year with the abortion restriction battle in the Texas House, which we have talked about, you know, several times, you and I, on the show, which was a common sense bill that she was very much against. And it just basically said if you're going to have an abortion, which you have that right to do here in Texas, then it's got to be done in the safest way possible for the mother. It just had a couple of qualifications in it. It just banned abortions after 20 weeks. It required abortions to be performed in an actual outpatient surgery center, required the doctor to share his name with patients. It said the doctor had to have privileges to admit patients to a nearby hospital. And so the progressives in the Texas House Senate were so against that they placed Wendy Davis front and center to conduct one of the grossest filibusters I've ever seen, with a catheter and pink running shoes. And she got her national rise to fame through that outlet. And the liberal media and the progressives were so excited to put this attractive face which she is, on their terrible message of unlimited abortions, infanticide, taxpayer-funded all-you-can-eat birth control, that they thrust her into the spotlight to run for governor. And we saw really fast that she was somebody who was clearly not ready for prime time.
Yeah, but you know what's funny is when you see Republicans, now Republicans say, hey, I like this guy. I mean, he's got several views, but we like him on education. But he's multifaceted. He's right on education. He's right on spending, blah, blah, blah. You know, Rand Paul it could be the flavor of the month when it comes to the issue of NSA spying. Ted Cruz is just an overall conservative Marco Rubio. And sometimes it's based on one issue, or at least one issue with minor of the issues out there. Ed, what are you getting at? Well, look at the liberals here. It's they like you not because you came up with a new idea, but because, hey, someone's championing the old issue of abortion. I mean, they're like Elizabeth Warren up in Massachusetts because she thinks we need more financial regulations out there. I mean, there isn't anything brand new, and this is what I'm getting at. I don't understand why they made her like they turned out to make her be Wonder Woman politically here, I guess I should say.
Well, for a state like California, she would have been Wonder Woman, but for Texas, she didn't quite fit the bill. And the fact is that she, like you're saying, she's a one-horse show. Right. She's a one-pony show. And I don't think that they anticipated the skeletons that were in her closet. I think nobody vetted her.
Well, wait, back up. Why? What I'm saying, why did they put all their eggs in? I mean, there's got to be more than just one Wendy Davis in Texas. So why did the liberal left put all their eggs in one basket then?
You know, who knows? That's a great question. I think that they got so caught up in the excitement and the hype, and if you lived here in Texas, that's all you heard about for weeks on end was this terrible war on women that Republicans were waging, and they found this woman who is a beautiful woman. She seemed to come across as smart and strong, and the feminists loved her, and that's all that they could see. They couldn't see past that.
Hey, Brittany, you just answered the question there, because usually liberal feminists don't have any attractive women. This is the only one they can actually find.
Well, it's true. She was an attractive face to put on a really, really gross cause.
And yet they now let's go beyond this now. Now they are dropping her. What are the reasons why? What are they giving out there? The Democrats.
Well, like I said, I don't think they anticipated the skeletons in her closet, that she just says a lot of stupid stuff. I mean, she got up and said during a speech that her opponent, Greg Abbott, has never walked in my shoes.
Oh, I remember that.
Greg's in a wheelchair. And she'll get up and say, my education plan is dynamic, and it's going to take on ideas as a ship takes on water. She's kind of a female Joe Biden. You just never know what's coming out of her mouth. She actually is very ignorant when it comes to the issues, which as the abortion warrior, she should be all over and have full knowledge of. She was asked about Goessling and claimed to have no idea who he was.
Oh, my word.
You know, you've got to be living under a rock or not paying any attention at all if you don't know who Goessling was. So this woman who made abortion her throne for national fame and attention hadn't heard of one of the most horrible crimes and trials concerning this very topic during that moment. So
and by the way,
a liar,
right,
or completely ignorant.
And by the way, there are plenty other out there just like Kermit Gosnell.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
They're just not being reported.
She was asked about her education proposal. She had all these exciting education proposals, and when they asked her how much it was, she had no idea. It was like a deer in a headlight.
Rick Perry had this. Is there something out in the water? Rick Perry had the same thing happen when he ran for president. Remember that?
There was a couple moments. There may be something in the Texas water we need to take a look at. But she's been exposed as a liar. I mean, another big hit to her campaign is we found out she completely fabricated her life story. She painted herself as this struggling, divorced and single teen mom at the age of 19, when in fact she wasn't divorced until she was 21. And that was a big step for her. She was saying, that Greg Abbott is completely out of touch with reality because he didn't understand the struggles that a young woman like her faced. And so she left out all these details that started emerging later, that, when she got married the second time, he happened to be a pretty well-off kind of guy who financed her entire way through Harvard. And then she filed for divorce the day after he finished paying off her Harvard law school loans. And it's also worth mentioning that he kept both of her kids for her while she lived in Boston. And she lost both of her children in a custody battle after the divorce.
Now you get into the Lifetime Movie Network type of a description.
Right, these are massively relevant pieces of information in regards to people's character, especially when they're getting up preaching a different story.
Yeah, but you want to know something. Liberals, when have they ever cared about character?
They don't. But there are a lot of people that are on the fence with people like her, and this whole story that she spun about being a downtrodden, pull yourself up by the bootstraps overcomer is a lie.
So pretty much you can put a knife in her. She's done, correct?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. In fact, one of the things I found that was really funny is, everyone was saying she basically had a sugar daddy, and so to add insult to injury, David Duke, Brandon Wade is the founder and CEO of a website that matches young women with sugar daddies, and he came out and endorsed her. So that just added insult to injury for her.
Do you happen to have that website address on you right now? So anyways, all right, Brittany Pounders from LibertyJuice.com. Hey, how popular is W? How popular the Bush is still out there?
It's waning. I think people they have Bush exhaustion.
Give an example. I mean, what is his number? I mean, just what people, 50, 60%, or not that high anymore?
I don't think it's that high. If I had to guess, I don't think it's that high.
Listen, I've met him. I know George P. What do people think of George P. out there? He's running for what, Texas Land Commissioner?
Right. He ran for, and he won the primary for that, which means he will definitely.
By the way, if I'm not mistaken, he wore the Tea Party. I mean, he wore the banner for the Tea Party, did he not?
No, in fact, he didn't. He wouldn't even show up to their rallies and speak at their, which did a lot of harm to him in the primary. I think he lost some votes that he probably should have been able to count on because he rejected and wouldn't be part of it.
Really?
Yes. Yes.
But what do they think about W out there? I mean, this is all because, the hype around Jeb Bush.
What I'm seeing, just from the pulse that I have, is that he's not real popular here.
So none of the Bushes.
People are, like I said, they're exhausted.
Yeah, but he's going to win.
The dynasties.
Yeah, but George P. is going to win. I mean, he's just a good-looking face. That's all he is.
Yeah, he absolutely. That was a give me. I mean, he had the money, he had the name. That was a give me position.
I'd have the same thing he has. I'd win too, just based on those two things. But anyway, so pretty much is. But I mean, is he going to win that? I mean, it's a very sexy job out there. But I mean, is he going to win that out there?
Who?
George P.
Yes, he'll win it for sure.
But then again, they're having fatigue. So, I mean, which way is it? They don't like them, or they...
I think when you're talking for president, I think they have fatigue.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Jeb because I covered him here as a news reporter for years. He was a great governor. I just think he's wrong on the issue of immigration. And he's wrong.
And I think that's going to be a huge nail in his coffin.
And Common Core. And the Common Core, what's really interesting about Common Core? I mean, do you ever follow that sometimes?
Yeah, it's kind of here in Texas we aren't dealing with it too much yet.
Right.
So... But I'm seeing it, nationwide.
Yeah, I think a lot of conservatives don't know how to properly explain it. I mean, this is the forefront. Either you don't like the curriculum or you don't like the federal government getting involved. And when I ask many of these anti-Common Core, which, by the way, I'm not a pro-Common Core individual, I've covered it, it's just like, really? They can't give me a straight answer. They don't know if it's the curriculum or because if you don't like federal government involvement in a curriculum, you don't believe the federal government should be involved in education, which I don't think they should be because I think the states can do it on their own. They've proven to do it on their own. Then you got to look at the curriculum. And I think sometimes you need to look more at the curriculum than just instead of the federal government getting involved. I mean, for example, I'm a states' right guy. I don't support same-sex marriage, but I think it should be left to the states. I don't think the federal government. Now, you may get some guy like Rick Santorum, who I've interviewed several times. Rick believes that we should have a federal law banning same-sex marriage. Now, that may sound good and the right thing to go with conservatives, but constitutionally, it's just not the right avenue. So when I look at certain individuals and ask them these issues, what I'm saying is do you believe that the issue is wrong, or when the federal government gets involved, is it wrong? And they just can't give me a straight answer on that issue.
Yeah, I think there's enough blame to go around. I think that the curriculum is wrong. I think the federal government, it turns anything that they touch to rut. And so you can rest assured that if they're involved, it's going to be terrible or get terrible real fast.
Has the immigration issue, we know that I believe that states do have an obligation to do something about their borders. Hence, you do have a National Guard. If you're supposed to enforce in federal laws and other issues, why are not enforcing a federal law when it comes to doing something about immigration? Has that become a big issue in Texas as well, or is that just kind of gone by the wayside?
No, it's a terrible issue. And in fact, I live in an area that is pretty close to, some of these cities that they find their havens in. And, we see people that it affects the schools, it affects the jobs, it affects the crime rate. I mean, it is a very big issue here in Texas, and people are very much concerned about it.
What's safer, Fort Hood or the border? And I don't mean, I'm not trying to sound, there's got to be a little humor because, what's happened there at Fort Hood, but it's just so amazing that we hear all these things that happen among our borders, nobody covers it, but when something happens at Fort Hood, it makes the nightly news.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. Well, and then on the borders, there's catch and release. So they get these guys,
right,
and then they immediately let them go. And if these police officers, arrest them, and they find themselves in trouble. So we either are a nation of laws or we are not, and we need to make that decision.
Real quick, about a minute or so left. Do you know who should be the biggest opponents of illegal immigration? Animal rights activists, because these individuals all kill animals at times, and also the environmentalists. I saw a documentary, and it did get picked up by the media, where the environmentalists were, because once these people cross this country, they leave all their garbage behind, and it's bad for the environment.
Disgusting. I've seen those pictures. Yes.
Yeah. So terrible. Yeah, but you don't hear anything from the liberal left on that. I think it's a fascinating issue, but it's again, we'll go after Clive and Bundy, who's a little creepy in some areas, but then again, we'll kill his cattle and things. But when it comes to those that are breaking this country illegally and everything else, wanting to do harm, we'll turn a blind eye.
Well, not just that. I live in a neighborhood where Homeland Security came screaming through yesterday morning because there was a home that was selling illegal handbags. So now, the feds are engaged in this terrible war against illegal handbags, whereas 6 miles down the street, you could go round up about 10,000 illegal aliens.
I wish I was a bounty hunter. I could get paid $100 for every head I'd bring in. I'm not that way.
I'd be a rich woman.
Dude, you and I would join forces with you guys. All right, listen, I got to go. Happy anniversary. Like I said, you're not going to be out in Texas for a few times. The big AFP's event's coming out there, so we're going to be taking the show out in August. Nice. I'll be out there, so I know. Hopefully I'll see you at that event. Brittany Pounders, libertyjuice.com. As always, have a good weekend. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you. We'll talk to you later.
Coming up, Shannon Goessling from the Southeastern Legal Foundation about the EPA. Folks, have you seen this issue on the EPA now? Again, guess what? They get to enforce more of their ridiculous regulations, also more. Should Sterling be kicked off the LA Clippers? I don't think so. Back in a few moments.
With SRN Sports, I'm Michael Harrington. Well, this has never happened in the history of the NBA. 3 Game 7s on the same day, this Saturday, to decide first-round playoff series. Here's how we got there. Indiana captured the must-win Game 6, beating Atlanta 95-88 last night to even that series at 3-3. David West led Indiana on a 16-0 run at the end. Paul George and West led the Pacers with 24 apiece. And West says,
I was talking to Paul, so it's got to be, him and me, down the stretch. We wanted to extend our season. I thought in terms of our team, we did a great job just, closing the show.
Oklahoma City stayed alive by routing Memphis 104-84. Kevin Durant led the way with 36 points, 10 rebounds. Golden State Warriors nipped the LA Clippers 199 to force a Game 7 and decide which team advances to the Western Conference semifinals. Stephen Curry with 24 points. This is SRN Sports. Round 2 of the NHL playoffs last night, 34th meeting for the Montreal Canadiens and the Boston Bruins in the postseason, and for just the 6th time, it required multiple overtimes to decide the game. P.K. Subban scored a power play goal at 4:17 of the second OT to give the Canadiens a heart-stopping 4-3 victory in Game 1 of that second round best-of-7. Tonight, 2 more conference semifinals get underway. The Rangers are at Pittsburgh. Minnesota Wild will host the defending champion Blackhawks. Major League Baseball yesterday in the American League, Tampa Bay took 2 off Boston, 2-1, and 6-5 was the Mariners 4, the Yankees 2, Toronto over the Royals 7-3. In the National League, Miami 5, Braves 4, the Reds beat Milwaukee 8-3. It was Colorado 7, and the Mets 4. In interleague play, the Dodgers beat Minnesota twice, 9-4 and 4-3 in 12 innings. It was the Orioles over Pittsburgh 5-1 and 6-5 in 10. With SRN Sports, I'm Michael Harrington.
WEJF Palm Bay, WKFA St. Catherine.
With SRN News, I'm Rich Thomason in Washington. House Speaker John Boehner wants to set up a select committee to investigate the deadly attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi. Boehner accuses the Obama administration of misleading the American people after the September 2012 assault. He says emails released this week show the administration withheld documents from congressional investigators. Boehner will be scheduling a House vote on establishment of the investigative committee. Also today, there's word that America's top diplomat has been subpoenaed to testify testify about the Benghazi attack.
Republican Darrell Issa has issued a subpoena to Secretary of State John Kerry to testify before his committee on May 21st. Issa wants to know why emails released this week by a conservative watchdog group were omitted from previous submissions to Congress. The emails from Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes show that within days of the 2012 attack on the U.S. Embassy in Benghazi, Libya, the White House embraced talking points for UN Ambassador Susan Rice. The talking points blamed uprisings on an anti-Islamic video. The attack on the U.S. Embassy killed U.S. Ambassador Chris Stevens and 3 other Americans. Linda Kenyon, SRN News, Capitol Hill.
Also at SRNnews.com, President Obama is hosting German Chancellor Angela Merkel for talks at the White House today, and topping the agenda,
we're united in our support for Ukraine.
2 leaders threaten tougher new sanctions against Russia if Moscow doesn't leave Ukraine alone. And if the Kremlin doesn't back off, Merkel says further sanctions will be unavoidable. The government says employers added 288,000 jobs last month, but while the unemployment rate fell to its lowest level in 5 years, it's due mainly to a sharp rise in the number of people who have simply given up the job hunt. This is SRN News. Orders to American factories advanced strongly for a second month in March, while demand in a key category that signals business investment plans increased by the biggest amount in more than 1 year.
The Commerce Department says orders increased 1.1% in March after increasing 1.5% in February. Those gains followed 2 months of declines in December and January. Orders for core capital goods, considered a good proxy for business investment, jumped 3.5% in March. It was the biggest increase since January of 2013. Bob Agnew, SRN News.
The attorney for a teenager who's charged in the fatal stabbing of another Connecticut high school student says his client is showing signs of active psychosis. Fire derailment of an oil train in Lynchburg, Virginia, has emergency officials elsewhere in the state concerned about their ability to respond to such accidents. More details at srnnews.com.
We are sorry for your pain. Sorry for the death. Israel's punished and you insist that the war not end or the threat to follow rockets
All right, it is hour number 2 of the Ed Dean Radio Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. The email address, eddeanradio@gmail.com, eddeanradio@gmail.com. Twitter's at eddeanradio, facebook.com/eddeanradio. Or if you want to watch us live on the air, just go to eddeanradio.com, eddeanradio.com. John Hawkins from Right Wing News, townhall.com. Columnist is going to join us here in just a little bit, as usual. And then on our Newsmaker line, the very exhausted, mentally correct, Shannon Goessling. From the
No, Ed. I am not exhausted mentally.
No, you will be after about 10 minutes on the phone with me on the air.
I'd be 30 seconds and I'm probably going to kill myself.
No, yeah, you're not waving the white flag because it's like you give up. It's like, I just don't want to do this anymore. Shannon Goessling, the very, very esteemed leader of one of the leaders of the conservative movement out there. You can go to their website. Their contact information is southeasternlegal.org. And the reason why I say that is many people don't realize that when you look at these EPA lawsuits, you guys are on top of all this. So that's the reason why you go take a look at the information out there. And by the way, before I get into this Donald Sterling nonsense, under the radar again, the EPA came out and got another glowing support by the Supreme Court.
Yeah, the decision came out this week on the 29th, and it's the American Lung Association and others against the EME Homer City Generation. If most people would recognize it as the Cross-State Air Pollution Rule Challenge, where basically, industry and citizens actually won against the EPA on this case at the lower court, but the Supreme Court took a very strict view of the legislation, the Clean Air Act. It's a different section than what we're challenging, and it ended up being a 6-2 opinion. And they ruled in favor of the EPA's interpretation. Now, I will tell you that under normal circumstances, I would be a bit concerned if there was such a favorable decision to the EPA, but the reasoning in the case, Ed, kind of helps me see a light at the end of the tunnel for our case come June. And that is that if the court, including the Chief Justice, are taking a very narrow view of the statute and reading the plain language of the statute, that's exactly the kind of, analysis we need in our case in June.
Let's talk about the generality of what the court has looked like lately. I mean, that affirmative action vote got knocked down by 6-2. A couple of the David Soder, and I'm surprised it even got that many votes to knock down a liberal measure like the affirmative action. Were you guys surprised, number one, it got knocked down, and were you surprised by the margin it got knocked down by the Supreme Court?
No, it's really challenging when you're talking about it, and it doesn't matter what case it is or what type of case it is. Most people try because of not wanting to get down in the weeds on a particular case. Most people try to make the most general comments possible, say in their 15 minutes with you, Ed. But you really have to look at the particular facts of every case. You have to analyze it. You have to look back at the present. You really need to have an understanding of the court's precedent and where the court has been going over time.
Well, I would agree with you. I mean, I'm in a total agreement with you, but most people don't hear the specific facts because they see the generality on the nightly news, and everything's a 4-3, 3-4, 4-3 decision. Nothing as a 6-2 or a 7-2 decision.
Well, the court has some unanimous opinions. They have some real strong majorities. You're going to see some dissents. So of course in the EPA Homer case, you're going to see Justice Scalia and Justice Thomas. They filed a dissent. So Scalia wrote the dissent, Thomas joined, and there is good reasoning behind that dissent. And it just so happens that either decision kind of speaks to potential success for us in June. And then when you're talking about, were you talking about the state constitutional provision regarding no affirmative action? Is that what you were referring to?
Right.
That's constitutional.
Right.
Okay. And that, that really speaks to states' rights and really a declaration by the citizens of a state that says we are going to protect the equal opportunities for all people. And we are no longer going to treat people different because of race. And the court, Chief Justice Roberts has said, the best way to stop discriminating based on race is to stop discriminating based on race. So, you knew where he was inclined to go. You knew where we're supposed to be going based on these other cases in the school admissions area. And now you have a state basically declaring what we mean by equal protection is actually equal protection. And just because the judiciary has allowed affirmative action over these years, we're not going to accept that anymore. We're going to tell you what equal protection is, and we're going to tell you why affirmative action is contrary to equal protection. And, reverse discrimination is still discrimination. So, I applaud the court, and I think that there was definitely writing on the walls that this is what we were going to see from the court. But people like to say it's anti-affirmative action. No, it's pro-equal protection.
I understand. Shannon Goessling is the executive director of the Southeastern Legal Foundation. The contact information is southeasternlegal.org. When you look at what happened back in 2000, there was a big kind of a push among several states to do something about some of the Supreme Court justices in the state, to not reauthorize them or just say, yeah, we want them to put them back. In other words, they don't vote them in or out, but you have to vote them for them, as for example, like Florida, to reauthorize them or reappoint them to stay in their leadership here. And then many people said, well, we need to focus on the Supreme Court justices, so be careful who you vote for president. Do you think that's become a stronger view now when you look at what Roberts did happened with Obamacare 2 years ago? Do you think that it never is the issue about who are you going to elect as a Supreme Court justice? I think it's one of the top 3, top 4 issues out there. It hasn't got much merit. Do you think when people vote in the next election that this may be an issue?
You mean retention elections or lifetime appointments or
Supreme Court wise? Supreme Court wise.
Now, look, the federal. I think most people recognize that although scenarios are not ideal, let's acknowledge. I mean, I would love for there to be the ideal, but there isn't. But the reality is that the federal system is lifetime appointment, and the states get to decide how they're going to have their justice system. And let's be also very clear that most people's causes of action, complaints, and issues are resolved in their state court system. It is a much smaller number that gets resolved in a federal system. So the average person is going to, if they go to court, it's going to be in their state system.
All right, but focus with me in a second. I'm talking an issue in the presidential election in 2016 because we saw what has happened. Obama got 2 justices. He was able to get there. Elaine Kagan and, of course, Justice Sotomayor. There's rumors out there that I know some of the liberals want to get Ginsburg to step down. She's like 180-something years old, I should say. And the thing what I'm getting at is, do you think that this will be an issue in the presidential election about, hey, listen, we know that if Hillary becomes president, she's going to put in liberals. We know we get somebody else. Guess what? We may get some conservatives where we don't have issues like Obamacare being voted in favor of.
I think that always for the informed electorate, the judiciary and the potential of having appointees during the presidential cycle is going to be an issue. To what extent that is going to speak to the motivation of the conservative base and conservative voters, I don't know. I know it should be because of the age of Associate Justice Pryor and Ginsburg. Those should come into play. And, Justice Kennedy also has some age on him, and, of course, he's swing vote. So I think it should. I think a lot of decisions coming from the Supreme Court, are having pervasive effects on us. I think that the average person should be greatly concerned about who's on our Supreme Court, but just because I think so and you think so doesn't mean that's actually what motivates the vote.
I agree. I don't think it does motivate. That's what I was asking. Do you think there will be a motivation? Now, when you look at the Constitution, you have to be a certain age to run for Congress. You have to be a certain age to run for president. I don't know what it is in Georgia. For example, in Florida, if you're a judge at 70, you can't be a judge past 70. But the Supreme Court has a lifetime appointment there. Do you think that we should probably put age limitations on Supreme Court justices?
Oh, that's an interesting question. There's so many reasons why part of me thinks that that's a yes, and part of me thinks that it's a no because there have been outstanding justices that have been on the court, into their 70s and longer who have done outstanding work. And then there are some that you question whether they should have the right. I think it's something to discuss, but I have to be honest, in terms of the top 10 things that I worry about, that's not even.
Well, I understand that. That's why I threw the issue in there. I mean, what I'm getting at is that, some people, I mean, we got congressmen that are just sitting there. I mean, it's almost like they had a problem up at the weekend in Bernie's type. They just don't know what the heck's going on here. So, I'm not listen, I know senior citizens. I've said this on the radio show before. You'll never see a law happen because it'll anger the senior vote. But I think once you get past, I'll even go to 70. I mean, I think your 60s, you're still, because of medicine, man. You're still going hardcore here. You may only slow down for a little bit, but I think 70 every few years, you should have a regular driver's course just to make sure you can mentally and everything else keep up. And I know there'll never be a law passed that because senior citizens, it's like they don't want to do that. So I'm not trying to put a discrimination here. I would just kind of bring that up because, sometimes when you reach past a certain age, we get a little mindful or forgetful of some things.
Sure. Well, and again, I return to, the judiciary's relationship with the citizens is mainly the states. For example, Georgia has judicial elections that are nonpartisan. We also have a rule that at 70, you cannot work past 70 as a judge unless you forego your pension.
Wow.
Normally somebody would say, well, I totally can work past 70. I'm doing great work past 70. And go, well, if you think so, then you can forego your pension. So they've actually created this kind of penalty system that encourages the judiciary to not exceed the age of 70. Now, that doesn't mean you can't, you can be a senior judge past 70 and that type of thing, but not a regular sitting, judge or justice. And I think that tells us what we think. It isn't that you can't be productive. It isn't that you can't be informed. It just means that these are positions of trust that we would prefer that you not hold. past a certain age. And I think that that's a reasonably fair assessment. But as far as the driving, I have to agree with you. I mean, I think that if you test 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, but see, I'm fine with having regular driving testing so that it isn't age
Well, I
discrimination
agree.
or reverse discrimination.
Now,
I'm
listen,
fine with that
quick question.
if people are on the road.
Quick question, because I need to get into the Sterling thing here. You very smart at what you do. Sometimes you sit. Are there times, and just give me a quick answer. Are there times where you sit back and go, you know what, this judge is just wrong. You know, if I was a judge, I would do a much better job. Are there times sometimes you sit back and go, you know what, I wouldn't mind running for a circuit court judge or a state judge here in Texas? Has that ever crossed your mind?
Well, you know, Ed, as the former Republican Attorney General candidate here in Georgia, the answer is yes, you can be motivated. It's twofold, and it has to be. One is what motivates you often is that somebody else in that position isn't doing a good enough job. And then your next is, I think I can do a better job. And I think that's the motivator, or we hope that it's the motivator for people who run for public office, that they believe that they can do that job and do it well for the constituency. And, you know, there are times when I look around and think, you know, but I also think my colleagues can do a better job. I mean, every time you look around, you go, gosh, I wish that, you know, so-and-so is in that job because I know they'd be great at it. But that's part of being an informed, you know, member of the electorate.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people look at me on radio and they just lose it because there's just no motivation because they just can't outdo me. All right, real quick. Donald Sterling here. He made some stupid comments. He said in the privacy of his home. And amazing the political correctness. I mean, now we can't say anything in the privacy of our home unless we want to lose our jobs. Should he lose his basketball team over what we saw happen this past week?
Well, you know, I think you have to start any discussion of Donald Sterling as everything that came out of his mouth is reprehensible.
Yeah, and
I understand he has justified it and said context, but the reaction that you're seeing from the public is absolutely appropriate. And I will tell you that I've taken a look at a lot of the stories across the internet about Mr. Sterling. This is the end of what has been a long history of problems with treatment of minorities. So you get him on tape saying basically what he's been doing all these years. Now, as to the relationship with the NBA, this is a man who's chosen to be public, chosen to own a public team that has a constitution and bylaws that restrict his behavior and potentially punish behavior that is exclusively private. So the First Amendment says you can say reprehensible stuff almost without question. There's certain parameters. You can't yell fire in a theater, right? But you can be reprehensible as a person. You can think reprehensible things, and you can say them. And there are only going to be consequences around you. Those consequences that he's experiencing are those that he voluntarily subjected himself to.
You know what I would do with a lot of these guys? You know, they say that sometimes life in prison is worth than getting the death penalty. Remember the Bible talked about how God should have killed Cain and said he put a mark on him, which means the guy got no sleep. I mean, he probably wished he would have died because, you know what, it just end this misery here. I've said this public on my radio show. I said, you know what, instead of just putting a knife in this guy, stick an IV in him, beat him up economically at the ticket counter. Don't buy his stuff. Make this guy want to sell the pressure of selling his team instead of just because, well, we don't like his comments, so let's just automatically kick him out. No, make the guy feel the pressure, but you do it through economic areas here. If the gay crowd isn't like Chick-fil-A, that's fine. You can boycott them, whatever, but don't sit and say, Truett Cathy and all his family needs to step down. You know what? You don't like them? Boycott them. Send a much stronger message then.
Well, I will tell you that, you know, the threat that he's going to lose his team, if that's what you're talking about, it takes a 3/4 vote of the owners. And for him to lose the team, they have to vote him out. And the Constitution and the bylaws are restricted, it appears, to financial errors. Like if the Clippers were in a bad financial state or they weren't being managed properly. Well, none of those things apply. So there's a distinct possibility, even if based on public pressure, the owners do in fact evict him as an owner, he would have a legitimate basis for a lawsuit. And remember, you know, we're talking about a free enterprise scenario here. He bought the team for $12.5 million. It's worth close to $1 billion. That man pays capital gains of 33%, I think, at a minimum, if he's forced to sell. Those are serious financial consequences that if it isn't required, look, he's already banned for life. He cannot have any contact. There has been no allegations that the team, as run by everyone else in the relationship, has been based on any type of racism or bigotry, and the team isn't having financial problems, and he's gotten the maximum penalty. I'm saying is there are rules in place. He violated the rules, and he has the consequences for that behavior. We'll see what they do from there.
Shannon Goessling, Executive Director of the Southeastern Legal Foundation. The contact information, southeasternlegal.org. Have a good weekend. As always, thanks for making the time.
Great. Thank you very much. Hope you have a great weekend, too.
You too. Thanks, Shannon. All right. Is Hawkins lined up, or is he still in bed? Guy sleeps till... What am I saying? I sleep late. I don't sleep late. All right, John Hawkins is supposed to join us from rightwingnews.com. All coming your way here. This is the Ed Dean Radio Show.
Good time. Good morning, good night. I wake up at twilight. It's gonna be alright. We don't even have to try. It's always a good time.
In News Business Brief, I'm Andrew Stewart. A Senate bipartisan team urging the House to take up a jobless benefits extension bill.
Rhode Island Democrat Jack Reed says the bill that passed in the Senate weeks ago is still awaiting action in the House.
This bipartisan agreement that we worked on, Senator Hill and I, is fully paid for. It includes reforms to help job seekers return to the workforce faster, and it strengthens our economic recovery.
Republican Dean Heller of Nevada says he's confident of the outcome if only House Speaker John Boehner would allow a vote.
This piece of legislation that we passed, that we worked together on, would pass the House of Representatives if they were to put that on the floor.
The long-term unemployment benefits ran out in December, just after Christmas. Linda Kenyon, SRN News, Capitol Hill.
Honda says a shorting terminal in the 2014 model year Odysseys, which prevents deployment of the airbag before it's put into the vehicle, may have been damaged during the assembly process. That may illuminate the airbag warning light and prevent the side curtain airbags from deploying. Honda says no crashes or injuries have been reported related to the issue, which was discovered through warranty repairs. Dealers will repair the minivans for free. Honda will notify owners starting May 16th. Keith Peters, SRN News.
The recall affects some Cadillac SRX SUVs from the 2013 model year with 3.6-liter V6 engines. GM says the problem happens when the transmission shifts from first to second gear and the driver brakes the vehicle to less than 5 miles an hour. The automaker says a lag in acceleration can increase the risk of a crash. GM has recalled about 7 million vehicles since February, including 2.6 million for a deadly ignition switch problem. The Education Department has revealed the names of 55 colleges and universities facing a Title IX investigation for their responses to sexual abuse and violence on their campuses. The schools range from huge public universities, including Ohio State and Arizona State, to private colleges such as Knox College and Swarthmore College. Some of the institutions say they're cooperating with the department, though they're offering scant details about what information the agency is seeking.
With business, I'm Andrew Stewart.
Wondering how you can support the economy in Brevard County?
There is one thing that we all can do.
Buy local. Buy local.
Support your local store.
Restaurant or bank. Anywhere you spend money.
In Melbourne, Palm Bay, Vieira, or the beaches. Businesses like ours support jobs.
And pay taxes. Keep yourself and your neighbors working. Buy local. Buy local.
To learn more, visit melpb-chamber.org.
All right, so I take it Hawkins is still in bed. Right, that's what my producer's saying. So, John, we'll get him up here in a little bit. More of the Ed Dean Radio Show, the #1 radio political talk show anywhere in the state of Florida. The email address, eddeanradio@gmail.com, eddeanradio@gmail.com, eddeanradio.com. You want to watch us live on the air and catch the audio and streaming of the show, eddeanradio.com. You can also go to Twitter at eddeanradio and facebook.com/eddeanradio. I've gotten plenty of emails from some of you out there, even claim to be, well, that's fine. I mean, I know a lot of Republicans like the arts. And what's your thing with the arts? Listen, this is not a rocket science thing here, folks. The bottom line is that I don't think that National Public Broadcasting or the PBS, the Barney, and Frontline. By the way, I think Frontline's got a very good show. I think the things you see on today, like National Geographic, all got their start on public broadcasting. There is no longer need for government funding, federal or state government funding for public broadcasting. Now, you want to have local public funding? That's your business. I've seen where we wasted thousands upon hundreds of thousands of dollars on the arts. I'll get that in a few moments. The bottom line is that the arts can make it. Some of the biggest, no, and I'm not talking about the Mapplethorpe collection either, all right, which was such a disgrace. Jesus's, picture in urine or the cross, whatever it was. The bottom line is if you want that, you fund it yourself. You can be despicable. You can be nasty. You can be sick. You can be disgusting. I'm just trying to tell you, if this is what you want with the arts, then you have every right to do that. If this is what you want in your Mapplethorpe collection there, then fine. I'm just telling you there should not be any government money when it comes to the arts. The bottom line here, is he on? All right, I'll get to him in a moment. The bottom line is when I see counties spending $200,000 or $300,000 on arts out there, well, the arts should be able to make it on themselves. I mean, if Wendy's doesn't make it, do we sit here and pump art money for that? Because I know they might have a painting in their store. We throw it underneath the label of arts and whatever. I mean, if a company can't make it, a company derives its revenues based on sales, based on however they formulate a type of a business plan. And the bottom line here is that it doesn't need any government money. Some of my Republican friends love spending county money on the arts. When public broadcasting and the arts, and you've got these theaters that have been around for 40 years, and it's a nostalgia out there, but yet they're not making any money. They're thousands of dollars in debt. And yet, if it's okay for GM, if it's okay for the big companies like TARP bailout, for them, because they're too big to fail, but they should have failed anyways, then my argument is very relevant here. All you liberals out there that don't think that big businesses should have gotten any money, I agree. But with GM, yeah, why? Because GM's union related, and because they're union related, we got to show partisanship. Oh, the arts, because the arts is good for communities, and this argument with arts, by the way, about schools. Can I tell you something? Arts are sometimes as an elective, which means it's an extra class. You pass all your grades, you need some extra credit, you could take it or whatever. Kids are not, listen, you want to have an arts program, then you find somebody to fund it. By the way, there are many companies that are willing to fund seventh period programs, for example, like Boeing wanted to do in Central Florida, to make sure that kids don't move out of the area, out of the state, because they want them to stay in the state, where some of these private companies like Lockheed and Boeing wanted to have some type of engineers. They would have paid for the extra elective period, not the school boards. Businesses were willing to do it because why? It was an investment in their future. But the arts, and you don't like, not at all. I think the arts are needed out there. I just don't think there is a need for government funding of the arts when the arts can make plenty of money on their own. And by the way, why should the arts try to go out and raise money if the government's going to give them money, for crying out loud? It just doesn't make sense. John Hawkins, you finally with me, brother?
I am with you.
My good friend.
And I did not catch what you're talking about. Is it the naked chick who does the thing with the egg?
No, I'm not talking about that. No.
That's too much for your audience.
That is too much.
That's the first thing I thought of when you started talking about these crazy art stuff.
Well,
I didn't even know you could describe that to your audience, and that's art.
John Hawkins, my good buddy, townhall.com columnist, his regular blog, which he gets over 100,000 hits a day. I wonder how many of those hits come from us promoting you on my radio show. But his web is our contact information is rightwingnews.com. All I'm saying is that I don't have a problem of now. Listen, national author, money to spend on the arts does not need it. State, if the state has the right to do it if they want to do it. If local county commissions through a voter wants to raise a tax to fund the arts, then that's voter approved. I have no problem with it. I'm just sick of. The bottom line is when you know the government's going to give you a sweaty wad of money, then what incentive do you have to go out and work to raise money for the arts? It's kind of like your article, which is it's pretty good here. Your article latest on Town Hall says 5 ways liberals hurt the poor. I'll give you one: by keeping them poor. That's how they hurt the poor.
Well, they do, and really amazing thing to me is you start thinking about how this works. We've got to borrow money from China so we can give it to somebody to dump a crucifix in a jar of urine and call it art.
Yeah.
And that's what's going on. How do you actually spend money on art when we're broke? And nobody accepts this. The liberals just this is what tells you how the mentality liberals have. They just refuse to accept the idea that there isn't infinite money for anything they want to do for any reason. The whole idea that we could be we're running huge debts, going trillions of dollars into debt, and funding art, it doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense at all.
Your article here, this kind of, like I said, segues into the conversation here, how liberals hurt the poor. I did articles
working on that right now. Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely.
I did a story about 20 years ago, and I said how welfare keeps people poor. I mean, the bottom line is you're getting a sweaty wad of a government check out there. Why do you need to go out and get a job, kind of like the arts funding? If you know you can get government money out there, I mean, listen, if people will pay $30 for the symphony, but you're only selling it for $20, my goodness, why? Well, because we get the other money from the government. There's no need for us to go out and try to make a profit here.
Yeah, and exactly. Why are we subsidizing the symphony? Who goes to that? A bunch of rich guys. And then the art thing is, well, we've got to get the arts out to everybody. You know, and I had this argument with a bunch of people on HuffPo Live when they were talking about PBS funding. It's like, this is the modern era. We have computers. Every bit of art you could ever want is available now on the internet. You can look at the Mona Lisa up close. You can listen to any type of symphony music you want, the greatest classics ever. For 99 cents, you could buy the MP3. Heck, they're probably cheaper than that for those things. What do we need to be subsidizing art for in this era? Give me some kind of justification, and there really isn't one.
No, there isn't one. I mean, they make it on their own. I mean, you got Nat Geo Live, which is one of the most popular shows on DirecTV. Ratings through the roof. They all got their break on PBS. These people can make it on their own. They don't need public. There is no more need for money for public broadcasting. Public broadcasting makes a profit. If they make a profit, and I'm going to ask all you liberals, if companies out there can make a profit, then why do they need government money out there through the Import-Export Bank or through TARP? If PBS can make a profit, National Public Radio does make a profit, by the way, why do they need government money?
And then they come back with, why do you want to kill Big Bird?
Yeah.
Listen, if we stop funding anything, Big Bird will be fine. There's dozens and dozens of places that would love to have Big Bird on because Big Bird is a huge profit-making industry.
Look at their toys.
Yeah, they're making all the money in the world. They're not going anywhere. Sesame Street's going to be just fine no matter what happens. So, why don't we just sell Sesame Street to somebody else? And then we can, and we'll make sure they stay on the air. Then can we cut the funding then? And then there'll be some other excuse. It's really, what it is? When you pay PBS money, it's corporate welfare. I mean, that's exactly what it is. You're giving a profitable corporation more money because.
Now, hold on, John. Hold on. We got to explain this properly here for some of the liberals. Corporate welfare, in some cases, depending on the definition of it is what it is. I mean, for example, that means that, for example, let's say the Miami Dolphins want to build a new stadium. The city of Miami has to not kick in as far as tax breaks, but they have to kick in like $60 million for renovation that they're going to do on their own, which means that to me is a lot of corporate welfare. There's a difference between how a company gets a tax credit than a company or a group like PBS and NPR that gets direct money. They don't get tax breaks; they get direct money out there. So I got to explain it to some of the audience. There's a big difference.
Yeah, you've got to actually break this down into a lot simpler for the liberals. But yeah, I don't understand why we're giving them corporate welfare, and we have this big battle over it, and we say, hey, it's such a small thing. Why are we having such a big battle over a small thing? Because if we can't pick that kind of low-hanging fruit off the ground, we have no hope. We're at a point where everybody's afraid that their Social Security and Medicare is going to be gone in 5 to 10 years. I mean, I think checks could literally stop. And we're having an argument about whether to give a profitable corporation money right out from the taxpayers. It's nuts. It's crazy.
Well, I mean, this is like saying, hey, John, I'm going to subsidize, I'm going to pay for your cell phone. Okay, I pay for the cell phone. Or I say, John, I'm going to give you the $150 a month to pay for your iPhone. Now, there's a difference. I pay for it. Do you get subsidized? Yes. That means I take care of the bill. It gets paid for. I give you the money, but you don't pay for the thing. It's a different story out there. That to me is direct corporate welfare. That to me is direct funding. I mean, if I'm still paying for it in a way, I mean, yeah, but I mean, I guess it's the definition of is it not?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and that ties right into this article I'm writing about 5 ways liberals hurt the poor. Because, I mean, if you take something like welfare, let's take something like welfare food stamps. All right, let's say we could, I mean, I think most of us would probably agree that if people are really in a jam, and we want them to temporarily have a way to help people who really get in trouble, but liberals don't even stop with that. They say, listen, temporarily, let these people stay on it as long as they want. If they want to stay on it 20 years, let them stay on it 20 years. What qualifications? What you mean no drug test? I mean, why are you going to drug test these people? That's racist and awful and terrible. How about we just give it to them limited, for a limited amount of time, so that they'll be motivated to get off of it?
Hey, how about this? How about be like an investor, but I invest the money, we pay as we go. You submit the bill, I pay for it. You tell me what you need. It's a pay. You know what I'm saying? It's a pay as you go. Instead of just giving a sweaty wad of money where there's no accountability, I sit back and say, okay, what bills? And then we'll take care of it that way. That would save a lot of taxpayers' money.
Incidentally, that's how a lot of churches do it. When they help
That's
people,
right.
they're like, give us a bill, we'll take care of your
That's
bill.
right.
Yeah, and because the government doesn't even care that much. They want to set you up and give you as much as possible for as long as possible, because really and truly, and people don't think about this, Democrats are better off when people are poor.
Do you ever realize, by the way, John Hawkins from rightwingnews.com, years ago I said something on radio. Some of my Republican friends were like, which way are you going with this? Let me set the premise. Subsidized housing is a complete joke, all right? Because it doesn't give people incentive to own a home, to show some, and it doesn't matter what's in the white or black community, it's just subsidized housing, to take some sort of pride. I've always told my conservative friends, instead of tearing down a forest, I know it's going to make me sound like I'm a greenie here, but follow the logic. Instead of new development, we have, because of the economy, we have existing development that doesn't exist anymore. You've got Albertsons and Winn-Dixies that are closed, and you've got neighborhoods that are run down. Look at Detroit. Why don't we sit back and say, listen, let's bring private business to take, because since Detroit doesn't have any money anyways, instead of building new areas, why don't we use the existing areas we have? And if we need to use it, let's instead of saying, well, we're going to throw money in the black community because like through a redevelopment, and we'll put up we got $500,000 sitting there, but let's put a new light. They call it taking care of the black community. I'm like, no, that's ridiculous. Why don't we go down there and sit back and say, listen, we want to build some new businesses here, but to the black community or white community that lives in subsidized housing or poor income, low-income housing, but you guys can have partial ownership. And if you don't take care of it, you're going to have to move somewhere else. If you do take care of it, it's like a rent-to-own, like a lease-to-own. Let me tell you something. You know how many people would jump on board with that in a heartbeat? As long as it's private development out there, and guess what? I know you're going to bring the government to partnership in there. It saves taxpayers $1, and it rebuilds a community instead of saying, well, yeah, we did something for the black community. We built a park, but it didn't really renovate the black community out there. I think there really are smart ideas to renovate low-income areas besides the same old subsidized housing type of nonsense we see today.
Yeah, I don't think that's a terrible idea. I don't think there's a lot of great things we could do. I think microloans, which they've done in other places, which you basically, all right, I need, let's say you're somebody who needs a lawnmower to get into business. We'll loan you the money for the lawnmower. You pay us back. You can do things like that. You can go out and do things like make taxes. Like, say, all right, there's a 10-year tax moratorium if you build a business in this area. And what do? You encourage businesses to come into an area. You get people jobs. Next thing you know, they've got a little more money, more businesses are moving in. What you're saying there, hey, setting up businesses where multiple people have helping them get into business and set things up where they have a chunk of the ownership.
Right. But John,
all these things actually get people out of poverty, which is why Democrats have no interest in it.
That's exactly
if they
right.
get out of poverty, then what do they need? They don't need the Democrats for anything. They're not going to vote for them.
Hey, John, I am all in favor. And me being in the financial world, you know me quite well. There are the low-income and middle-class people need to hear about financial stuff. The people that I think need it more are people in the black community out there. And it's not because they're dumb and stupid. It's just no one will help educate. And it doesn't matter whether it's white people. I'm just using a color right now, as some liberals like to play color envy, and they're like, I'll do the same thing because, it's black, Hispanics, and Jews. All right, fine. Let me oblige many of you. The black community needs help. And I'm sick of the way that politicians, and some on both sides locally, sit back and say, well, we need to energize the low-income community. Then fine. Do something about the crime. Go out and then talk to these people besides when you're only running for election. There needs to be conversation back and forth with the black community. Republicans ought to stop this nonsense by going and showing up to an NAACP dinner and thinking that, well, we just reached out to the black community. No, you need to be out there all the time because we know the Democrats take advantage of them. And I'm not saying trying to win them on a bunch of pork barrel spending. I'm saying have a blasted conversation with these people. Go out and say, listen, you know what? Instead of saying we're going to tax a certain community through redevelopment, and that's how we're going to change the black community. No, you don't sit to have a redevelopment. You bring businesses over because I would tell business, listen, you've got 10,000 black people sitting in this certain city of Florida. These are economic numbers. We can revitalize this. That means the community looks better, the community looks cleaner, and guess what? Everybody's getting a job these days. Nobody has these conversations, John, and to me, it's not a left versus right type of an issue.
Well, it shouldn't be. I think, for example, it's an absolute disgrace that there's anybody in America who has to be frightened to let their kid play in the yard because there's a drug dealer on the corner, and a bunch of gangbangers may come and snatch them up and get them into their gang. I think it's terrible that people have to be terrified for their lives. And this is the sort of thing, listen, the left doesn't mind having these crime-ridden neighborhoods because it helps keep people poor. Because the crime-ridden neighborhood, if it's terrifying and it's scary, well, you know what? It's kind of harder to get your life going. It's hard for business to move in. You don't want to move into an area where your employees are going to get shot. I mean, there are so many things we can go out and bring to people who are economically disadvantaged, who are poor, but liberals don't ever want to have those conversations. They're just like, listen, stay poor forever, stay on welfare, and just vote when we tell you to vote.
Let me tell you, I got to take a quick break. You going to hang out with me for a few minutes?
Absolutely.
But let me tell you something. If there's times I thought about running for city. I haven't. I probably would never would. But I mean, there's times if the first thing I do when I become a city councilman or a commissioner. No, I live in the country, so this probably wouldn't work because there isn't a low-income housing where I live. I would go like the cities of Orlando or Melbourne and Palm Bay, and for all the talk that we've been doing for the last 25 years, instead of building a Habitat for Humanity home, let's build plenty of homes and let's bring the humanity that those that have the habits of, hey, the government habits, which means the habit of keeping people poor. I would go in the black communities and totally revitalize all that and do whatever I can and tell businesses, hey, guys, listen, I'll clean this place up. It doesn't matter if it's a white community or black. It's a low-income area. Let's clean this place up with crime. That's what I mean by that. And because these are numbers. These are economic dollars. And guess what? If you could sell it that way, then you could hire people within that area. You could definitely help them out by revitalizing the community. And I think it's a win-win. Unfortunately, both sides talk about it, but they don't do anything about it. Back in a few moments, I'll give you some brilliant ideas from the Ed Dean Radio Show.
This is SRN News.
The Labor Department says the unemployment rate fell by 0.4% to 6.3% last month. The figures are a sign the economy is picking up following a brutal winter, which slowed growth. However, the decrease in the jobless rate occurred in large part because the number of people seeking work fell sharply.
The chairman of the White House Council of Economic Advisors is offering a measured response to the better-than-expected jobs report. Jason Furman describes April's employment growth as solid and says while the report happens to be above expectations, it's broadly consistent with recent trends. He says the president continues to believe more can and should be done to support the economic recovery. In January, President Obama requested a review of data laws following an outcry over the NSA's surveillance programs. White House Counselor John Podesta led the review and has released a report offering recommendations to safeguard Americans' data and provide more protections for emails sought during law enforcement investigations. The recommendations are not binding, but they're in line with many of the president's previous calls for addressing privacy issues. Greg Clugston, SRN News, the White House.
Representative Tammy Duckworth has introduced a measure that would prevent lawmakers from using their congressional allowances to book first-class airline seats. Duckworth says, in her words, "As members of Congress, we lead by example." She adds, "With so many working families out there trying to make ends meet, it's important that we do not spend taxpayer dollars on luxuries like first-class air travel." House members receive an allowance each year for staff, travel, and office expenses. The average allowance is about $1 million. Linda Kenyon, SRN News, Capitol Hill. Louisiana Democrat Mary Landrieu and North Dakota Republican John Hoeven introduced the bill they say will grant approval to build the oil pipeline. The challenge, they say, will be to get the 60 votes they need to advance the bill. It's uncertain if a Keystone bill would be attached as an amendment to an energy efficiency bill or if it would be a standalone measure. Some senators say they will not go along with the bill. Among them is Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. He says the law makes it clear that it's up to the administration to decide whether the Keystone Pipeline will move ahead. Congress's role is limited to issuing construction permits. Linda Kenyon, SRN News, Capitol Hill.
More details at srnnews.com.
Hi, Bob Vila here. Details really mean a lot to me, and they should for you too, especially before you hire a contractor to do work around your house. So don't forget this important detail. If you're about to hire a contractor for any reason, ask to see the person's contractor's license. Write the number down and always ask for references. Then visit myfloridalicense.com or call this number to verify the license is current. Details count. Always check your contractor's license and references.
All right, more of the Ed Dean Radio Show. John Hawkins from rightwingnews.com here on the show. So liberals, when it came to the issue of Cliven Bundy, as I said, the issue should have been focused on the ridiculous Endangered Species Act. I mean, you can argue whether or not the federal government should be in the business of owning land. But overall, it was just not in Bundy's best interest to do what he did or did what he do or whatever. And then, of course, making racial comments, which is now it's been overshadowed by what needs to be discussed. Now you look at Donald Sterling, who said something in the privacy of his home, had nothing to do with it, was basketball related. And, of course, underneath the disguise of a franchise, liberals are like, we need to get rid of this guy. My question is, if this guy owned a regular with no franchise, he owned and he does own this company, by the way, the LA Clippers. He owned it outright. Then I want to know to the liberals, do you think this guy should be kicked out of his job because he said a stupid, ridiculous, racist comment? Where do you stand?
Well, I think if I were in the NBA and I were an owner, I think I would probably vote him out of his job. I do think it's sort of a strange case, different than a lot of other ones, hard to find something else that's applicable, because I think in entertainment, like let's say you're a movie star and they're getting ready to cast you for a role and you say something incredibly offensive and terrible that's going to make it impossible to get people to your movie, I think it's okay to go out and say, well, we're going to cast somebody else. And I look at it a little bit like that. But, I mean, I think you could go right down the list. I think they want to use this as a precedent. I think you've seen with Brandon Ike at Mozilla, where it's like, well, anybody who disagrees with liberalism, let's get them fired.
Yeah, but hold on, wait. You just said something based on the market. You can sit back and say, we don't know if we want to hire this guy because he may be a flop. Then again, he may not be a flop. But let's say the guy makes racist comments. You don't want to hire him because you don't think people will come see him. Well, that's fine. It doesn't mean you kick the guy out of Hollywood, John Hawkins. You just sit back and say, hey, I'm not going to hire this guy. I think, see, this is the thing. I want this guy embarrassed, and I want the market to dictate and sit back and say, hey, you know what? I'm not buying a Clippers ticket. I'm not buying into their jersey and their garbage. That's the way I'm going to show it. And let me tell you something. That wakes up people a lot quicker than just say, oh, we're going to get rid of the guy.
The honest truth is, I think what you'd find over time is people would buy it anyway. I think that's what, I think you'd have a short little blip, and then everybody would go back and buy all the same stuff and go to the Clippers. And so I think if they wait that long, I think what's really happened that drove this thing wasn't so much liberals complaining about it, was players in the NBA complaining about it. And I understand why they complained. I think they were embarrassed and upset. I do think it seems a little skeevy that a lot of the people who are out in public talking about, oh, this is awful, this guy should go, like Magic Johnson and Oprah, are now out there saying, good, maybe we can buy his team. I think that seems a little, I don't know, it seems a little sleazy. Reminds me a little bit of the Japanese internment. We have, let's put these Japanese people away in these camps, then they bought their property. It just seems a little sleazy to me.
I never even thought about that.
Well, I do think it's kind of interesting that the same people are out there saying this is outrageous, they should sell this team, are now saying, well, yeah, we'll buy it. I'm sure they'd buy it at a really great number, too. But although this guy, you know, he's 80 years old, he's got all the money in the world, he seems like really litigious. I wouldn't be surprised if he hung in there. And, I mean, it's not a slam dunk firing because the first thing that's going to happen is the NBA's got to get, I think it's 2/3 of the fellow owners to vote him out. But then, you know, he can go into court. You get into discovery. Who knows what this guy knows about what other sleazy things other people in the league have said? I mean, well, you're going to throw me out for this? Well, guess what? This guy said this. Should he go too?
You know what,
and I think it can get really ugly and embarrassing and stretch on for years.
There's more of an hypocrisy. I would be more offended, not by saying, because, you know, he was, you know, when you listen to that tape, he was, I mean, he didn't have a problem with black people. In the next sentence, he did have a problem with black people. I mean, maybe the guy was just on dope or something. I don't know. But, I mean, if you really wanted to kick a guy out for a reason, I mean, you look at him being the lawsuit brought on by the federal government, Department of Justice, for saying I'm not going to allow blacks or Jews or was it Koreans to come in to rent from homes that I own or rent from buildings or rooms that I've built and stuff. I mean, that's a more a logistic way than by somebody's stupid comments. To me, based on his actions out there. And I'm just telling you, people have the right to be stupid. They have the right to say stupid comments. How do I punish them? I don't go to their restaurants. I don't go watch their shows. I hurt them in the back pocket where it really counts.
Well, I'm all in favor of that. I think this is sort of a weird, complicated case. I mean, just to give you another example, they're not finding evidence in the way he behaved that the guy is that racist. You can hear what he said. He's also banging a 38-year-old black chick, you know, which is interesting. He's made how many, dozens, if not hundreds of black men millionaires?
He gave money to the local NAACP, yeah.
Yeah, you look at all this and go, well, you look at his actions, now in the NBA at least, I think his actions were definitely racist when he was being a slumlord. But you look at it and say, gee, the guy's not really behaving racist. I mean, if that's what racism has come down to our society, guys who are dating black women and making black men millionaires and giving money to the NAACP are secretly racist, I don't know. I think we won.
Yeah, I mean, the NAACP was ready to give him a Lifetime Achievement Award. I mean, for crying out loud, are you kidding me here? They knew what was going on. It was all based on money.
Well, it was, but I guess I just look at this, and I think I think about this guy and Cliven Bundy, who made those really dumb comments, and say, you know what, these guys are both really, really old. They're the last relics of this age, and and even the way that they feel that way. I mean, like Cliven Bundy has a black bodyguard who said he treated him like a son and he'd take a bullet for him. I mean, this is what racism's come down to. It's like a bunch of old guys who have some improper thoughts and generally seem to be doing the right thing in public. I mean, I don't know. And we have this sort of witch hunt mentality about it. We're looking for it everywhere. Oh, there's racism here, there's racism there. We've got to find it and root it out. I mean, when you root it out, I got to tell you, this isn't terrible. I mean, this is what we've come down to.
Follow me for a second. If the Al Sharptons and the people really wanted to see what America looks like as far as their disgust over these comments, then don't stick don't whack them right now. Let's see what happens economically. For example, I think it'd be much more bragworthy to the liberal left, and I probably would agree with them on this. If you don't like the comments, don't sit there and force them out. Let's sit back and say, hey, listen, did it really mean for him to kick him out, or was it, or let's hurt him economically? See, that means if the people didn't show up and say, you know what, if the majority of people in that area didn't want to go see an LA Clippers game because of the comments that he said, let me tell you something, the liberal left would look totally legitimate here. I would actually agree with him because basically it's about, hey, I'm showing you my disgust by not patronizing your establishment. That is the real and right way to go. I don't know why they're afraid of that.
Well, it's the same thing. I mean, look, if they could bounce people out of their living, they've got, the left does not believe in that whole Voltaire idea. I may disagree with what you say, but but I'll fight for your right to gosh, I mangled that badly. I disagree with what you say, but I'll fight to the death for your right to say it. They're like, oh, you disagree with what I say? Well, I want your entire life destroyed in every way humanly possible now.
Right.
And so they're pushing. But again, I think some of it's the left. I think a lot of it came from NBA players who felt this way, who were really upset. I mean, I think that drove a lot of it. I don't think it was necessarily, let's say, pressure from Al Sharpton. I think he was almost a side note in this. I think it's guys like Kobe Bryant and who were coming out and saying, "Oh, this is disgusting." And Magic Johnson does have.
Yeah, but here's the thing: if he sat there hanging out with Jim McKay and other guys, and Charles Barkley on the TBS TNT network, analyzing playoff games, and he said this on TV on Basketball Air. He said this at being interviewed at a Clippers basketball game, doing analysis. Hey, I don't think my girlfriend, who's half black and half Hispanic, ought to be bringing her black friends to my games. You want to know something? Then you got something to knock them around with. Big time. But, I mean, realistically, when he said something privately, it's a different story.
And again, that's why I said it's such a complicated case, because what he said is genuinely really, really offensive also. But you go, you know what? It never should have been out there. It's private. It's a private, illegally recorded conversation.
Right.
Another thing that kids should pick up from this is if you have enough money, you'll always have a really hot girlfriend. Because this guy's 80, and the girl who's recording this, his sleazy, hot girlfriend,
she's a gold digger.
38. She's pretty hot.
Yeah, she's gorgeous, but she's a gold digger.
She's a gold digger, but I'm just saying, it's like that. It's just pretty amazing to me that this guy's got something wrong with him. I think it's pretty amazing to me that people have not made a bigger deal of the fact that he's still married.
Yeah.
This guy is married. He's banging her on the side. He actually apparently was doing a stripper on the side. And, I mean, he sued this stripper. I guess she's a stripper and
I don't know.
prostitute on the side. And, I mean, he was very open in his statements he was making about what all they were doing in court. And all the NBA just sort of, I mean, I think that's as offensive as the racist.
Do the girls that hang out with you because you're very rich, do they hang out with you because they like you or because they're gold diggers?
I'll take either or.
I'm just kidding. The rich part, I'm not kidding.
Man, they all just hang out with you. I mean, we hang out with them because they're attractive.
That's right. All right, my good friend John Hawkins from rightwingnews.com. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me on.
I love you, brother. Thank you so much for coming on. Have a good weekend, everybody. We'll see you on Monday. Richard Miniature, from probably one of the best, well-informed politically guys I've ever hung out with, ever met. I really mean that. He's going to join us, I believe, on Monday's program. It's about Benghazi. He wrote the book, The Eyes on Target, Losing Bin Laden, Shadow Wars, Leading from Behind, former vice president of Washington Times, and also with the Wall Street Journal is going to join us on Monday. That's going to be a great show. But I'm going to have a good weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.
With SRN Sports, I'm Michael Harrington. Well, this has never happened in the history of the NBA. 3 Game 7s on the same day, this Saturday, to decide first-round playoff series. Here's how we got there. Indiana captured the must-win Game 6, beating Atlanta 95-88 last night to even that series at 3-3. David West led Indiana on a 16-0 run at the end. Paul George and West led the Pacers with 24 apiece. And West says,
I was talking to Paul, said it's got to be, him and me, down the stretch. We wanted to extend our season. I thought in terms of our team, we did a great job just, closing the show.
Oklahoma City stayed alive by routing Memphis 104-84. Kevin Durant led the way with 36 points, 10 rebounds. Golden State Warriors nipped the LA Clippers 199 to force a Game 7 and decide which team advances to the Western Conference semifinals. Stephen Curry with 24 points. This is SRN Sports. Round 2.